Chapter 11: The First Night Out. The road to the tower was long, and I was on foot with no ride to speed up the journey. I decided the first thing to do was to get to the nearest village. I needed a place to sleep and some food in my belly. From where I stood, outside the Arashi estate, if I just kept walking straight, I should hit a village eventually, based on the information provided on the map. I had no idea how long it would take, but this walk was also my chance to get stronger. I figured if I ran instead of walked, I could work on my dexterity. The idea was to keep running until I couldn't run anymore, or until the village came into view. So, with the thought of the village as my goal, I started running. The scenery unfolded before me like the pages of a book I had never had the chance to read. Fields of tall grass swaying in the gentle breeze. Occasional clusters of wildflowers dotted the landscape, vibrant and pulsing with the rhythms of summer. The air was fresh with the scent of earth and growth, a stark difference from the sterile, controlled environment of the Arashi compound. Overhead, a few wispy clouds drifted lazily across, the only blemishes in an otherwise endless blue. My feet kicked up small clouds of dust as I traversed the dirt path. The ground was firm, baked by the summer heat, but it felt good beneath my soles, real and solid. Insects buzzed in the air, while birds sang from hidden perches in the occasional trees that lined the way. Every sight, every sound, every scent was new to me. I had never known the world to be so full and so alive. The estate, for all its luxury, had never offered me this unfiltered experience of nature. The true beauty this world had to offer. I noticed how the landscape slowly changed as I ran, how the rolling hills rose and fell. The further I ran, the more I realized that the world outside was a complex web of life. It spurred me on, pushing me to run faster. The sun, once high in the sky, gradually began its descent toward the horizon. Its golden hue slowly deepened, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Despite the beauty, a sense of urgency began to gnaw at me. I hadn't encountered a single soul. The paths, which I had imagined bustling with travelers and merchants, were eerily deserted. The only companions I had were the occasional birds returning to their nests and the insects that seemed to grow louder as the day waned. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows on the ground, a mild anxiety began to set in. The village, which I had assumed would be within a day's journey, was nowhere in sight. The landscape, though beautiful, offered no hint of civilization, no smoke from chimneys or distant lights of a settlement. My run slowed to a jog, and then to a walk. Fatigue was setting in, not just from the physical exertion but from the realization that I might have to spend the night outdoors, unsheltered and alone. You have gone past your stamina limit. You have gained 1 dexterity stat. The alert from my internal status jarred me slightly. I had just run all day nonstop to get this 1 point. It made me think about how hard it is to get better at something. When I worked on my vitality, which took me a week to go from 5 to 6 points, I took a lot of breaks through the week. But for dexterity, I had to run the whole day without stopping for that single point. I wasn't certain if this stat was easier or harder to increase compared to vitality. There's no point in running anymore. Let's find a place to rest. With the night closing in, the cold began to seep through my clothes, chilling me to the bone. I shivered, realizing that the cloth provided by Alora and my mother, though comfortable, were not made for the harshness of a night outdoors. My knowledge of survival was non-existent. I had no idea how to construct a shelter or start a fire. All I could do was find refuge behind a large tree and wrap myself in the additional cloth from the bag, hoping it would provide some warmth. My body shook uncontrollably from the cold. A desperate thought occurred to me. I was alone, with no one around to witness or judge. Perhaps, I thought. Carefully, I removed my clothes, leaving them in a pile beside me. I moved to a nearby clearing, a flat area devoid of trees and grass. On the ground, I gathered small branches and leaves, arranging them into a makeshift pile. I knew nothing about starting a fire the traditional way, but I had something else, my self-immolation skill. With a deep breath, I activated the skill. Instantly, flames engulfed my body. The initial warmth was a relief in the cold night, but it quickly turned to pain. I reached out, my hand ablaze, and touched the pile of branches and leaves. The fire from my body leapt onto the kindling, and soon, a small fire pit came to life, crackling and throwing off heat. Quickly, I deactivated my skill. The brief exposure left my body scorched and sore, a harsh reminder of the skill's destructive power. I hastily dressed again, wincing at the contact of the fabric on my tender skin. But now, I had a source of heat and light, a small beacon in the dark night. Sitting by the fire, I felt a mix of relief and wariness. Despite the pain, I had managed to fend for myself, using the very ability that had caused so much turmoil. Who knew being a human torch could come in handy in the camping department? I chuckled to myself, watching the flames dance. As the fire crackled, its warm glow battling the cold darkness, I realized something important. I had made it through my first time out on my own. This small win, needed and a bit desperate as it was, showed me that I was starting to become someone who could handle things by myself. As time ticked by, sleep eluded me. There I was, sitting by the small fire I had created, wrapped in my thoughts. The possibility of wild animals lurking nearby kept my senses on high alert. Every crackle of the fire, every rustle of leaves in the gentle night breeze set my nerves on edge. Maybe it was the fear of being attacked, or perhaps it was the sheer adrenaline of surviving my first day outside that kept me awake. Unable to surrender to sleep, I decided to put the restless energy to good use. Training seemed like the most practical option, a way to channel my focus and, hopefully, tire myself out enough to eventually fall asleep. It was time to work on enhancing my strength stats. I began with basic exercises, kicks and jabs. These movements, though simple, were effective at the early stages of building strength. As I practiced, the night air felt cool against my skin. My initial attempts at kicking were clumsy, my leg movements awkward and unrefined, far from the precision I had imagined. When I switched to jabs, it was the same story. My fists moved through the air with more enthusiasm than skill, each punch lacking the smoothness and force I knew they needed. It was clear that, having never trained in martial arts before, I had a lot to learn. Yet, as I persisted, I could feel a gradual improvement. Each kick became a little less awkward, each jab a bit more coordinated, though they were still far from perfect. As I continued, my breaths became heavier, labored with each kick, each jab. Sweat beaded on my forehead, the cool night air turning it cold against my skin. Finally, feeling thoroughly spent, I slowed down. My arms and legs were heavy with fatigue. I had turned a sleepless night into an opportunity to grow stronger. Sitting back down by the fire, now just embers glowing softly in the dark, I felt a deep tiredness seep into my bones. Maybe now, sleep would come. The rigorous workout had done its job, sapping the excess energy that had kept me awake and alert. My body finally began to succumb to fatigue. As I lay there, my mind began to quiet. The whirlwind of thoughts and worries that had plagued me earlier drifted away, replaced by a serene calmness. My breathing slowed, my body relaxed, and I drifted off into a much-needed rest. Chapter 12 Rainy Refuge. Chirp, chirp. I awoke to the gentle nature and soft chirping of birds acting as my alarm clock. The sun's early rays filtered through the tree branches, casting their light on the ground around me. They brought with them a warmth that was a welcome change from the cold of the night. The air was fresh, filled with the earthy scent of dew on grass and the lingering smokiness from last night's fire, now reduced to mere ashes. Stretching out my stiff limbs, I sat up and ran my hands over my face, rubbing away the remnants of sleep. The roughness of my palms against my skin helped bring me fully awake. I took a moment to take in my surroundings. Still as beautiful as yesterday. Grumble. However, the beauty of the morning couldn't distract me from the gnawing hunger in my stomach. I hadn't eaten anything since leaving the Arashi estate, and the pangs were a harsh reminder of it. If I didn't make it to a village soon, I would be facing not just another day of travel, but a day of starvation. Determined not to let that happen, I stood up, dusting off my clothes. Today, like yesterday, I would run. I would push my body, train my dexterity, and hope that each step brought me closer to civilization and to food. As the hours passed, my legs moved in a steady rhythm, propelling me forward across the varying landscape. But as the day wore on, with no village in sight, my hope began to wane. The monotony of the scenery, the unchanging rhythm of my footsteps, and the persistent hunger started to weigh heavily on me. Pushing through the fatigue and hunger, I noticed the sky above began darkening. At first, I barely noticed it, my focus firmly on the path ahead. But soon, the first few drops of rain fell, light and sporadic, quickly transforming into a steady downpour. The sudden rain caught me off guard, soaking through my clothes and leather bag in moments. I contemplated seeking shelter under a tree, but the thought of stopping, of losing precious time, made me hesitate. It was then, amidst my indecision and the increasingly heavy rain, that I noticed a shape emerging through the curtain of water ahead. It was a carriage, moving slowly along the same road I was on. In this downpour, the carriage seemed almost like a mirage. I quickened my pace, splashing through the growing puddles, my eyes fixed on this unexpected encounter. As I approached, the carriage seemed to take on more form, a sturdy, well-built vehicle, its sides splattered with mud from the road. The driver, covered with a cloak to shield from the rain, held the reins of two strong-looking horses that seemed unfazed by the weather. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice barely audible over the rain and the clopping of the horses' hooves. The driver pulled back on the reins, and the carriage rolled to a stop. I reached it, out of breath and dripping wet. However, my plans came to an abrupt halt when the carriage, which I had initially seen as a beacon of hope, stopped not to offer assistance, but to block my path. It was then I noticed the armed guards surrounding the carriage. They were well equipped and had a stern, imposing presence. The carriage, which had seemed like a chance for rest, now appeared more like a mobile fortress, and the guards' stern expressions made it clear they were not here to offer help. One of the guards, a tall man clad in armor that glistened with raindrops, stepped forward. He eyed me with suspicion, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Hold it right there," he commanded. "Move any closer, and it'll be the last step you take." I stopped in my tracks, the seriousness of the situation dawning on me. The thought of trying to negotiate my way into the carriage vanished instantly. These men were not the type to show leniency to a stranger on the road, especially under such suspicious circumstances. Understanding that my chances of getting a ride were next to none, I shifted to my next pressing concern. "See, could you please let me know how far is the nearest village from here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite their cold and the intimidating presence. The guard scrutinized me for a moment, as if weighing whether or not to provide the information. After a brief pause, he finally spoke. "Marloth Village is about a half-day's walk from here, in the direction you're headed." I nodded, a mixture of relief and resignation settling in. A half-day's walk wasn't ideal, but it was better than wandering aimlessly. "Thank you," I said, deciding it was best to maintain a polite demeanor. I then proceeded to walk past them, keenly aware of their watchful eyes and hands resting on their sword hilts. Their gaze followed my every move, a silent reminder of the warning they had issued. Once I had fully passed the carriage, I picked up my pace. The rain continued to pour, drenching me, but I was determined not to let it slow me down. The knowledge that the village was a half-day's walk away spurred me on. Behind me, the guards and the carriage remained stationary. I didn't look back, my focus was solely on the path ahead. It wasn't long before the carriage and its guards disappeared from my sight, swallowed up by the curtain of rain. Yet, curiosity gnawed at me. Who could be so important, or what could be so valuable, that it warranted such a guarded and well-armed team of escorts? The way the guards had acted, their hands ever ready on their sword hilts, suggested they were protecting something, or someone, of significant importance. Were they guarding a high-ranking official, a member of nobility, or perhaps transporting a precious cargo? The possibilities churned in my mind. Such displays of security were not uncommon for individuals of high status or for the transportation of valuable goods. But out here, on this rural rain-drenched road, it felt out of place. I shook my head, trying to clear these thoughts. Speculating about the carriage and its occupants wasn't going to get me anything. After what felt like an endless journey through the relentless rain, the outline of the village finally came into view. You have gone past your stamina limit. You have gained 1 dexterity stat. As I approached, a small notification flashed in my mind. My dexterity had increased by 1. It was a small victory, a result that was much welcomed. The village itself seemed almost deserted, the streets empty due to the pouring rain. The buildings were modest wooden structures, arranged in a way that gave the village a cozy, if somewhat cramped, feel. There were a few small shops and barracks, their windows dark and lifeless in the dreary weather. But one building stood out, the largest one, which I immediately recognized as the village inn. This was clear from the wooden sign hanging by the front door that had written on it. I made my way to the inn, my clothes soaked and clinging to my skin, my energy nearly spent. As I pushed the door open, a wave of warm air hit me. The inn was surprisingly well lit and lively. A number of villagers were gathered inside, seated at tables, eating and drinking. Their conversations paused as they turned to stare at the sudden, drenched guest. Their gazes were fixed on me, curious and a bit cautious. It was an uncomfortable moment, but I pushed past it, making my way to the reception. Behind the desk, a man sat in a relaxed posture, his feet propped up. He seemed to be in charge, or at least he acted the part. "Excuse me," I said, my voice hoarse from the cold rain. "I need a room for the night, please." The man looked me up and down, taking in my messy state. He then slowly took his feet off the desk and sat up, eyeing me with businesslike appraisal. "A night's stay is 4 bronze coins," he said, his voice carrying a no-nonsense tone. "And if you're wanting a meal before you turn in, make it 5 bronze coins." Hearing the reasonable cost, relief washed over me. I quickly reached into my bag, pulling out 5 bronze coins. The coins clinked as I placed them on the desk in front of the man. "1 room and 1 meal, please," I said, my voice carrying a hint of gratitude. The man nodded, scooping up the coins with a practiced hand. He then rummaged behind the desk for a moment before producing a key, which he slid across the desk to me. "Room 2, upstairs on your left. The meal will be served in a few minutes. Go take a seat, it will be brought to you," the man instructed, his tone shifting to a more hospitable one as he gestured towards the common area. I nodded in acknowledgement and made my way to an empty table near a corner, my stomach rumbling in anticipation of the meal. Sitting down, I took a moment to observe the patrons around me. They were a diverse bunch, some appeared to be locals, enjoying their evening meal, while others, though a small minority, looked like travelers, much like myself, seeking shelter and sustenance. Before long, a server approached with a tray carrying my meal, a hearty stew that smelled delicious, along with a chunk of fresh bread and a small mug of water. My mouth watered at the sight, and I thanked the server as they set the food down in front of me. As I began to eat, savoring the flavors of the hearty stew, the inn's door suddenly swung open, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. A woman, drenched from the rain, hurried in. She cradled a small child, about 2 or 3 years old, in her arms. The child looked ill, his little face was pale, and he coughed weakly in her embrace. The woman's eyes were filled with worry and desperation. She made her way straight to the reception desk, speaking urgently to the man who had checked me in. Even though I couldn't hear their conversation, it was clear from her demeanor that she was pleading for a room. My heart sank as I watched the man behind the desk shake his head firmly in response. The woman's desperation intensified. She dropped to her knees, her voice raised in a plea, tears streaming down her face as she begged for a room for the sake of her sick child. The room fell silent, the atmosphere turning tense. The man at the desk, visibly irritated, raised his voice at her, exclaiming that she was making his customers uncomfortable. His lack of compassion was startling. Yet, the woman persisted, her cries echoing in the inn, filled with the fear and helplessness of a mother trying to protect her child from the harshness of the night. The scene unfolding before me resonated with a deep and personal memory. It was like a vivid echo from my past life, bringing back the haunting image of my own mother, her face etched with desperation and tears, begging for help as I, her child, lay dying in my bed. The helplessness in her eyes, the trembling fear in her voice, all of it came rushing back to me as I watched this woman plead for the sake of her sick child. Her situation mirrored the despair and hopelessness that my mother must have felt. I couldn't stand idly by. Moving towards the reception, I reached into my bag, pulling out another 6 bronze coins. With a firm hand, I placed them on the desk in front of the man. "Please, give this woman a room for the night, and a meal for her and her child," I said, my voice steady and resolute. The woman looked up at me, her tear-streaked face a picture of astonishment and disbelief. It was clear that this act of kindness was the last thing she had expected in her moment of desperation. She tried to speak, but her words were choked by emotion. I turned to her and offered a reassuring smile. "Please, join me for a meal," I said gently. "You and your child need to eat. You can go to your room afterwards." With a shaky hand, she wiped away her tears and nodded, her eyes still wide with gratitude. Together, we walked back to the table where I had been sitting. The patrons in the inn, who had been watching the scene unfold, now turned their attention back to their meals and conversations, the moment of drama having passed. As we sat down, the server quickly brought over another portion of the stew and bread. The woman cradled her child, who was still coughing but now had a place of warmth and safety, at least for the night. Chapter 13, Church of Lumier. The scene before me was heart-wrenching. The child, frail and weak, coughed intermittently, but his eyes sparkled momentarily at the sight of the food. His mother, her face a portrait of maternal devotion, gently helped him eat, one small spoonful at a time. Her own hunger seemed a distant concern compared to her child's well-being. Moved by the scene, curiosity and concern nudged me to break the silence between us. "What happened to your child?" I asked, my voice soft but filled with genuine concern. The woman stopped mid-bite, her spoon suspended in the air, and looked at me. Her eyes were pools of sorrow. "He's been ill for some time," she said, her voice weary, laden with struggles. "We've been struggling to get by. Without proper nutrition, his health just deteriorated." "And the father?" I prodded gently, sensing there was more to their story. "What about his role in providing?" Her lips quivered, and her eyes welled up. "And my husband, he died a few months ago. He was delving into the tower." Her revelation struck me, a reminder of the tower's merciless nature. I hesitated before asking the next question, but I needed to understand her situation fully. "What about using your class to find work? These days, even productive classes can find employment." Her response was barely a whisper, laden with a weight that seemed to crush her spirit. I can't. I'm a discarded duck." At her words, I felt a jolt of shock. Discarded, a term cruelly bestowed upon those who, by the whims of fate, were not granted a class at birth. These individuals were often marginalized, forced to live on the fringes of society, their lack of a class making them almost invisible in a world where one's social standing and livelihood were dictated by their class. I looked at her, with sympathy. Here was a woman, a mother, who had been dealt a harsh hand by life. She had lost her husband to the tower's unforgiving depths and was now struggling to care for her sick child, all while being shunned by a society that valued classes above all else. The discarded were often left to fend for themselves, their chances of obtaining a class slim to none. To do so, one would have to venture into the tower and reach a significant level, a feat nearly impossible. Even among the nobility, there were those unfortunate enough to be born without a class, a situation that could bring shame and dishonor to a prestigious family. However, the key difference lay in the resources at their disposal. Noble families, unlike those of humble origins, had access to wealth and influence, which they could leverage to mitigate the disadvantages faced by their discarded members. They could afford to hire experts, seasoned adventurers, and skilled professionals to accompany and protect their classless kin into the tower in order to gain one form of deity. However, for the common folk, such as the woman before me, these options were but a distant dream. They had no such means. Their status as discarded was often a life sentence, consigning them to a lifetime of hardship and struggle on the fringes of society. In a certain light, one could consider the woman fortunate, at least in one aspect of her challenging life. Despite being discarded, she had found love and companionship with a man who possessed a class, a rarity for someone in her situation. Uncommon as it was, this union had provided her with a semblance of security and normalcy in a world that often looked down upon those without classes. However, her respite was cut tragically short by her husband's untimely death in the tower. Her situation was bleak, illustrating the unfairness of our world. The woman's eyes, though clouded with the shadows of despair, still held a flicker of hope as they met mine. "I am traveling to the Church of Lumier," she replied, her voice a soft echo of her determination. "I've heard they have healers there, people with the class to cure illnesses. I'm hoping they can help my son." "The church? Does she not know about their reputation?" As I was about to respond, in order to offer a word of caution, the door of the inn burst open, cutting me off on my track. The sudden entrance drew the attention of everyone in the room. It was them, the well-equipped escorts of the carriage I had encountered earlier, as imposing as ever. In total, there were 6 of them, and walking amidst their protective circle was a young girl, roughly my age. The inn's patrons turned their gazes towards this new group, curiosity and a bit of apprehension in their eyes, just as they did me. The young woman in the middle seemed out of place among the burly guards. She had an air of importance about her, yet there was also a vulnerability that couldn't be missed. One of the escorts, who appeared to be the leader, broke the silence with a commanding voice. "What are you lot looking at?" His tone was sharp, his demeanor intimidating. In response, the patrons quickly diverted their gazes, returning to their meals. As the escorts and the young girl approached the reception, a sudden, harsh cough from the sick child cut through the inn's atmosphere. The sound caught the attention of the young girl being escorted. In a swift, almost instinctive motion, she broke away from her guards and made her way towards our table. Her sudden movement caused a stir among her escorts, but she managed to reach us before they could intervene. "Poor child, he must be suffering quite a bit," she said softly, her eyes filled with genuine concern. The mother, taken aback by this unexpected approach, instinctively pulled her child closer, unsure of the girl's intentions. The young girl, noting the mother's wary expression and their worn appearance, quickly understood their plight. "I'm a cleric," she announced, her voice gentle yet firm. "I can heal your child." This revelation sent ripples of surprise through the inn. The mother's eyes brimmed with tears of gratitude, her voice trembling as she thanked the girl for offering to use her abilities to help her son. The girl reached out to the child, ready to perform the healing. However, before she could begin, the leader of the escorts intervened. He grabbed the girl's arm, pulling her back. "As a new member of the Church of Lumier, you can't just heal people as you wish," he said sternly. "You need the church's approval for such actions." I couldn't help but be taken aback by the revelation that the young girl was associated with the Church of Lumier. This church wasn't just any religious institution, it was one of the longest-standing and most influential organizations known. Rumors even circulated that their leader was immortal. The Church of Lumier was renowned for its unparalleled healing abilities. They possessed the power to perform miraculous feats of healing, such as fully regenerating lost limbs, feats that were unheard of elsewhere. However, accessing their services was notoriously difficult and expensive. Even the simplest healing spell from them would cost a minimum of 10 gold coins per cast, a sum far beyond the reach of ordinary people. Their influence stemmed from their monopoly on healing classes within the human faction. Whenever they discovered someone with healing abilities, they would swiftly move to recruit them, offering privileges and benefits that were hard to refuse. Yet, it was known that some resisted, leading the church to resort to more forceful tactics, such as threats against families, to secure their compliance. This monopoly had turned the Church of Lumiere into something akin to a mercenary religion. Adventurers and explorers delving into the higher floors of the tower often required healers, and the church capitalized on this need. They would rent out clerics and healers to parties for exorbitant fees, cementing their position of power and influence. As I reflected on this, I couldn't help but ponder my own past. If only my family had access to the church's healing services, perhaps my broken body in my first life could have been mended. But the cost was prohibitively high, and my family had opted for a cheaper alternative, healing potions produced by apothecaries and alchemists. While less effective, these potions were all they were willing to invest in my care. Over the years, the amount spent on these potions must have been substantial, yet it was a mere fraction of what a single healing session from the church would have cost. When the expenses for my care grew too burdensome, my family had chosen to let me go, to let me die rather than continue bearing the cost. The girl, defiant in the face of the escort's admonition, retorted, "I haven't accepted any of the church's terms yet. I was brought to them against my will after my parents sold me to pay off their debts." Her voice was laced with a mix of anger and sadness. "You wouldn't understand how hard life is in the countryside. You're all nobles from birth, not like me, not like us. I was just a normal girl from the countryside before all this." The tension in the air was palpable. The cleric girl, torn between her newfound obligations and her desire to help, stood defiantly against her escort. The mother, clutching her sick child, looked on with a mix of hope and uncertainty. The escort leader insisted that the girl must refrain from using her healing abilities without the church's permission. However, the girl's defiance only grew stronger in the face of his insistence. "If you don't let me heal this child, then I'll refuse any offer the church throws at me," she declared boldly, her eyes blazing with determination. "And I will make it known that it was because you stopped me from helping someone in desperate need." Her words struck a chord of panic in the escort leader. Realizing the potential fallout from this confrontation, the escort leader relented. His primary mission was to escort the girl safely to the Church of Lumier, and he was not prepared to risk jeopardizing that objective over this incident. "Fine, do as you please," he muttered, stepping back. "But make it quick. We have to proceed to the church as soon as possible. We'll rest until the rain stops and we'll proceed with our journey to the church." The girl nodded, her expression softening as she turned her attention back to the sick child. She moved closer to him, her hands hovering just above his small, frail body. The inn fell silent, the patrons watching with bated breath as the girl closed her eyes. A soft, warm light emanated from her hands, enveloping the child in a gentle glow. The mother watched, tears streaming down her face, as the child's coughing subsided and his pale face gained a touch of color. The healing process was gentle and quiet, yet the effect was immediate. As the young cleric prepared to leave with her escorts, the mother, still holding her now much healthier child, reached out to her. There was a profound gratitude in her eyes, a deep need to acknowledge the kindness that had been shown to them. "Wait," the mother called out gently. The young girl paused, turning back towards her. "Please, may I know the name of the one who saved my child?" The young cleric smiled softly, a hint of warmth in her expression that had been absent earlier. "My name is Emilia," she replied. The mother nodded, repeating the name as if to etch it into her memory. "Emilia," she said. "I will never forget this kindness. You have given my son a new chance at life." "Thank you, Emilia." Emilia nodded in acknowledgement, her eyes reflecting the sincerity of the mother's thanks. With a final glance at the mother and child, Emilia turned and rejoined her escorts. Witnessing this act of compassion and defiance, I couldn't help but feel a renewed belief in the goodness that still existed in the world. Chapter 14: Unlikely Allies. After a night of much-needed rest at the inn, I woke up feeling rejuvenated. The comfort of the bed and the peace of the night had worked wonders, easing the exhaustion from my journey and the events of the previous days. I stretched, my muscles grateful for the rest, and got ready for the day ahead. Descending to the reception hall, I found a quiet corner where I could enjoy my breakfast. The meal was simple but satisfying. Finishing my meal, I approached the reception counter to inquire about the best way to reach the tower. The innkeeper, a man of middle years, listened to my query and pondered for a moment. "Your best bet to reach the tower quickly would be to find a carriage heading in that direction," he suggested. "Many travelers and merchants pass through here. You might be able to hitch a ride with one of them." It's a common practice, especially for those headed toward the tower. He gestured towards the window, where several carriages were arranged outside. Take a look out there, he suggested, his tone implying a stroke of good fortune. Due to yesterday's downpour, many travelers sought refuge here, so you might find yourself in luck with so many carriages gathered in one place. There's a good chance one of them could be heading towards the tower. It's a long journey on foot, especially for someone who hasn't traveled much. I thanked the innkeeper for his advice and headed outside. As I approached the carriages, I could see various people loading their goods and preparing for departure. I approached each group, politely inquiring about their destination and whether they were headed toward the tower. Most were friendly, though they were traveling in different directions. But I didn't lose hope. I knew it was just a matter of time before I found someone heading my way. Finally, after several attempts, I noticed a group of young adventurers, not much older than myself, preparing to set off. They caught my attention not just because of their age, but also due to the air of camaraderie and excitement that surrounded them. They seemed to be around the same age as me, and their energy was palpable. Curious, I approached them and inquired about their destination. A young man, who seemed to be the leader of the group, turned to me. He had a confident demeanor and a friendly smile. "We're heading to the tower," he announced, his voice carrying a hint of pride. Hearing this, hope surged within me. "Would it be possible for me to join you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. The thought of traveling with a group, especially one heading to the tower, was appealing. The young man hesitated, exchanging glances with his companions. "Give us a moment," he said, before turning to confer with his group. As I waited, I took the opportunity to observe the team. There were 4 of them in total, 2 boys and 2 girls, and their bond was evident. The first boy, presumably the leader who I had spoken to, had an air of natural authority. He was tall, with short, dark hair and keen eyes that seemed to miss nothing. The second boy was slightly shorter, with a lean build. His eyes were bright, and he had an easygoing smile, giving off a vibe of being the group's light-hearted spirit. The first girl of the group was striking, with long, flowing hair and a serious expression. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, and from the way she checked and double-checked their supplies, it was clear she was meticulous and detail-oriented. The second girl was a contrast to the first. She had a vibrant, infectious energy. Her hair was cut in a practical bob, and she laughed easily, her enthusiasm seeming to guide the spirits of the entire group. Watching them interact, it was clear they were close, their conversation marked by inside jokes and shared glances. Each seemed to bring something unique to the group, creating a balanced and cohesive team. "Hey, sorry to keep you waiting. We got so caught up in our plans that we forgot the basics. Let me introduce ourselves. My name is Isaac," he said, extending a hand. He then gestured towards his companions. "These are my childhood friends, Lucas, the quick-witted one with a knack for strategies." He pointed to the boy with the easygoing smile. "That's Lila, our group's planner." He indicated the girl with long flowing hair and a serious demeanor. "And this firecracker here is Mia, she's Mia," he concluded. "Hey! That's hardly a fair introduction." "I'm yes, I'm just Mia," she nodded, breaking into a contagious laugh that soon had the whole group chuckling. Isaac joined in the laughter before regaining his composure. "We've been together since we were kids, and now we're setting out to fulfill our dream, to become S-ranked adventurers by conquering the challenges of the tower," Isaac explained, his eyes shining with ambition and excitement. I had forgotten all about rankings. The ranking system for adventurers is a crucial part for those who delve into the tower. It operates on a scale from F to S, with F being the lowest and S the highest. Most adventurers, especially those who challenge the tower, register with the Adventurers Guild. While registration is not mandatory, it is highly beneficial for a couple of key reasons: wealth and fame. Firstly, wealth plays a significant role. Adventurers who are not registered with a guild often struggle to earn any significant compensation for their efforts. Once registered, they can accept various quests and missions from the guild, providing them with a steady stream of income. Additionally, they can legally sell any items they find in the tower, be it monster body parts or rare artifacts. These items can fetch a high price, making them a lucrative source of income for adventurers. However, due to their rarity and exceptional qualities, many adventurers often choose to utilize these finds themselves. The second major benefit is fame. In a world where power and status are paramount, an adventurer's rank in their guild can greatly influence their standing in society. Higher ranks not only bring greater prestige, but also open up opportunities for more challenging and rewarding quests, further increasing an adventurer's wealth and fame. This visibility can garner attention from the nobility or influential figures. An adventurer's rank is determined by their accomplishments, skills, and the successful completion of quests. Climbing the ranks from F to S is no easy feat. It requires not only strength and skill, but also intelligence, perseverance, and often, a good team. For many, reaching the S rank is the ultimate goal, signifying that one is among the elite adventurers. S-rank adventurers are revered and respected, often becoming legends in their own right. They are the ones who have not only survived the tower's countless perils, but have also made significant progress to its floors. About my request. As I inquired about my request to join the group, I could sense their hesitation. They exchanged uncertain glances, clearly weighing the potential risks of having an unknown individual like me join their tightly knit group. Despite my eagerness, I could understand their concerns. After all, they had no idea about my abilities or intentions. Determined not to give up so easily, I insisted, even offering to pay them for the opportunity to travel together. This offer seemed to change the dynamic of the conversation. The group huddled together once more, deliberating in hushed tones. The smaller boy, described earlier by Isaac as the strategist, nodded after a moment, signaling some level of agreement. Isaac then turned back to me, his expression more open but still cautious. "We might consider it," he said, "but it depends on how much you're willing to offer." I pondered for a moment. My financial resources were limited, a few bronze coins and even fewer silver ones. However, the chance to travel with a group, especially one that knew the way to the tower, was too good to pass up. Considering the cost of lodging and food at the inn, I decided to start with an offer that seemed reasonable. A night's stay and a meal cost 5 bronze coins, so I proposed to double that amount. "I can offer you 10 bronze coins," I said, hoping the amount would be enticing enough. "It's the equivalent of 2 nights at an inn, including meals. It seems fair, don't you think?" "All right, we're leaving now. You can get into the carriage while we sort out our belongings," Isaac announced. Accepted into the group, I clambered into the carriage, a wave of excitement washing over me. The interior was cozy, and as I settled in, my mind buzzed with the thought of making new friends. Friendship was something I never experienced in my previous life, so the prospect now was both thrilling and new. As I looked around, eagerly taking in every detail, I noticed a small crack near the back of the carriage. Curiosity piqued, I squinted my eyes, peering through the gap to catch a glimpse of the group outside. I was still musing over the idea of forming bonds with these fellow adventurers when the atmosphere I observed through the crack took a sharp turn. The easygoing smiles and camaraderie that had been so apparent in our earlier interactions had vanished. Isaac moved towards his luggage with a purposeful pace. His expression was no longer warm and inviting, it was serious, almost grim. I watched in confusion as Isaac pulled out a short dagger from his bag. With practiced ease, he concealed it in his pocket. He then exchanged a look with the other 3, Lucas, Lila, and Mia. Their faces, usually so open and friendly, were now stoic, marked by a silent understanding that passed between them. What is he going to do with that knife? Don't tell me. The thought sent a jolt of anxiety through me. The shift in their demeanor, the hidden dagger, the unspoken communication, it all pointed to something I hadn't anticipated. My excitement about making friends gave way to a flicker of doubt and apprehension. What had I gotten myself into? Lucas took his position at the front of the carriage, ready to take on the role of the driver. Isaac, along with the 2 girls, made their way to the carriage entrance, their expressions still void of any emotion. However, as the door opened and they stepped inside, their faces transformed. Bright, joyous smiles appeared, as if by magic, masking any hint of the serious exchange that had just taken place outside. Their smiles seemed genuine, a continuation of the friendly demeanor they had shown earlier. As I observed the sudden transformation of the group's demeanor, my initial excitement turned into unease. The shift from open friendliness to secretive actions and back to smiles made me reconsider my decision. I cleared my throat, ready to voice my change of heart. "Isaac, I've been thinking," I began, my voice hesitant. "I feel like I'm intruding on your long-shared adventure. It's clear you all have a strong bond, and I wouldn't want to impose. I think it's best if I leave." Isaac, who had just stepped into the carriage, paused at my words. "You already paid, and it wouldn't be honorable to let you leave now." "Would it?" he said, his tone suggesting a mix of surprise and insistence. I was adamant, though. "Please, keep the money. Consider it a thanks for considering my request," I said, moving towards the carriage door. But before I could finish my sentence, the carriage jolted into motion, rolling forward and marking the start of our journey. Taken aback by the sudden movement, I stumbled slightly, grabbing a seat for balance. I looked at Isaac and the others, realizing that leaving now wasn't an option. The carriage was already making its way down the road, and we were en route to the tower. "Oh, glad to see you've reconsidered," Isaac said with a noticeable hint of relief in his voice. Resigned to the situation, I sat down, attempting to calm my nerves. A faint sense of foreboding coursed through my mind. Chapter 15: Clandestine Conversation. Just as I was about to step out of the carriage, the sudden, forceful movement jolted the vehicle forward. Lucas, who was handling the driving, had pushed the horses into a surprisingly rapid start, causing me to lose my balance. I stumbled, falling back into my seat. As I sat there, I contemplated my earlier apprehensions. Was I overthinking the situation? I wondered to myself. After all, it wasn't unusual for adventurers to carry weapons, especially when allowing a complete stranger to join them. If I were in Isaac's shoes, wouldn't I also prepare some form of self-defense, just in case? The roads to the tower and the adventures that awaited were filled with unknown dangers. It made sense for the group to be cautious and prepared. Perhaps their earlier behavior, which I had perceived as secretive and alarming, was simply a display of prudence, a necessary measure in a world where the unexpected could and often did occur. With these thoughts, I settled back into my seat, still somewhat skeptical but willing to give the situation the benefit of the doubt. I decided to put my reservations on hold, though not entirely dismiss them. Remaining vigilant was important, but so was trusting the journey I had embarked myself upon. By the way, Mia, the vibrant girl with the bobbed hair, leaned in my direction. She looked at me with an expression that was both playful and slightly teasing. "Huh?" In a tone that was undeniably flirtatious, she continued, "You've got a pretty impressive physique." Her gaze lingered on me, hinting at more than just casual observation. Caught off guard by her sudden and direct compliment, I felt a flush of embarrassment. My interactions with women, limited to my mother and a maid in my previous life and this life thus far, hadn't prepared me for this kind of comment. Thank you," I managed to stammer out, feeling awkward. Before I could regain my composure, the other girl, Lila, chimed in, her tone curious yet approving. "Yeah, Mia's right. You do look quite strong. Is it because of your class? What class are you?" "Yeah," with such a muscular and tempting physique, Mia began, her voice taking on a seductive quality. "One surely focuses on either strength or vitality, don't they? Like a strong, irresistibly charming, protective, and oh so reliable warrior," she added, her words lingering in the air, each word punctuated with a suggestive gaze directed squarely at me. It was then that it clicked for me. Their compliments, while flattering, were more than just casual observations. They were trying to gauge me, likely trying to understand in which spectrum of danger I leaned in by learning about my class. In a world where one's class often defined their abilities and role, this was a common way of sizing up individuals. My class, pyromancer, was indelibly linked to the Arashi lineage, a fact well known throughout the world. Revealing this would inadvertently disclose my connection to the Arashi family, a detail I needed to keep hidden. Since being exiled from the family, it was crucial to avoid any association that might draw their attention or lead to unforeseen consequences which could endanger me. Determined to keep this information concealed, I decided to steer the conversation away from myself. Well, every adventurer has their strengths, right? I replied with a casual smile, deflecting their question the best I could. It's fascinating how diverse classes can be. For instance, what classes do you all have? It must be quite a combination to aim for the S rank. My question, posed with genuine interest, seemed to catch them slightly off guard. However, their enthusiasm for their own journey and goals soon took over. One by one, they began to share details about their classes and experiences. Mia was the first to respond. "I'm an apothecary," she said, her voice still carrying that seductive tone, clearly on a mission with a specific goal that seemed less about genuine interest and more about a calculated approach. "I provide support to the team with potions. My arsenal is limited for now since I need to level up. Like everyone here, I only have one skill so far. Here, take a look." To my surprise, Mia then revealed her ability. This was unexpected, as showing one skill could potentially put them at a disadvantage. The only way to see another's skill information was if they willingly revealed it to you, other than through specific unique and rare artifacts like those used in the Arashi family ceremony, or through skills that were unique and limited to a few individuals. My skill is called Mystery Potion. It's a bit of a gamble, really. Each potion I make gets a random, concealed effect. The twist is that neither I nor the person using it knows what it is until it's consumed. Thought we have our way to find out the effect, but it's a secret. As she described her skill, I couldn't help but be cautious about the strategic reveal. Was it a gesture of trust, or was there an ulterior motive? Mia leaned in closer, her tone playful yet suggestive. "So, Kyan, if you're ever feeling adventurous, come to me for a potion. Who knows, the effect might be special for certain activities," she said with a wink. It struck me as odd how the rest of the group remained silent, almost as if Mia's behavior was expected. I glanced around at the other members, searching for any sign of reaction or disapproval, but found none. They seemed unfazed, leaving me to wonder if Mia's actions were a regular occurrence or part of a strategy to gauge my reaction. Internally, I questioned the dynamics of this group. It seemed strange that her companions would allow such a forward approach towards a stranger unless it served a purpose. Despite these swirling thoughts, I maintained a composed exterior. "I'll keep that in mind, Mia," I responded with a polite, if somewhat guarded, smile. The other girl, Lila, who had been quietly observing the exchange, spoke up next to reveal her class and ability. "I'm a baker," she began, her voice calm and steady. "My skill is Nutritional Boost. It allows me to enhance the effects of any consumable item I create." Her revelation piqued my interest and also brought a hint of surprise. It was well known that productive classes like cooks, blacksmiths, and in this case, bakers, typically stayed away from the dangers of the tower. They often focused on honing their craft to the highest level, making a living out of their skills without the need for leveling up or acquiring new abilities. Their skills were valued, and they played a critical role in the support system of adventurers and townsfolk alike. To find a baker like Lila, with a skill aimed at enhancing consumables, as part of a team venturing into the tower was unusual. "This is quite interesting," I remarked, genuinely intrigued. "It's not often you see a productive class among a group of adventurers heading into the tower." Lila nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "Yes, it's a bit unconventional. But we believe that every skill, no matter how non-combative it might seem, has its place. You might not realize it now, but eventually you will." I see. Thank you for the clarification." As the conversation shifted, my gaze naturally turned to Isaac, the group's leader, expecting him to reveal his class and ability next. However, to my surprise, Isaac's response was quite different from the others. He met my gaze with a direct and cautious look. I'm a cautious man, Isaac stated firmly. I prefer not to disclose my class and ability. In our line of work, some information is best kept confidential. His response resonated with me, echoing my own thoughts about discretion and the need to protect one's personal information, especially in unfamiliar company. I respect that decision, I replied with a nod of understanding. It's wise to be cautious. However, this turn of events seemed to unsettle Mia and Lila slightly. Well, then, Kyan, it's your turn, Mia said. Lila nodded in agreement, expectantly looking at me. Following Isaac's approach, I decided to maintain a similar level of discretion. Like Isaac, I also believe in exercising caution. I hope you understand, but I'd prefer to keep my class and abilities private for now. My response seemed to deflate their curiosity, and although they appeared slightly disappointed, they didn't press further. However, I noticed them exchanging glances with Isaac, their expressions not of anger but more akin to a broken plan, as if an unspoken strategy had been disrupted by our mutual reluctance to share information. As the carriage continued its journey, I settled into a contemplative silence, wondering what to expect along the path towards our destination. Chapter 16: The Warm Lies and Cold Truth. A note from FirstBite. This chapter is somewhat lengthier than my usual writing, but I hope you won't mind. Enjoy. The journey continued with small conversations, nothing too intense or revealing, just enough to pass the time and build a basic level of comfort among us. As the day transitioned into late evening, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the group decided it was time to set up camp for the night. Despite my lingering skepticism about the group, I followed their lead and pitched in to help set up camp. We worked together to prepare the campfire and other necessities for a night outdoors. It was a cooperative effort, each member contributing. Lila, as the group's designated cook, took charge of preparing our meal. The rest of us gathered around the fire, awaiting dinner. The warmth of the fire and the comforting crackle of the flames created a cozy atmosphere, easing the weariness of the day's travel. Small talk gradually shifted to more pointed questions, as if they were trying to piece together the puzzle of my presence and intentions. Isaac, always the direct one, broke the ice with the question that seemed to be on everyone's mind. So, Kyan, he began, his gaze steady and inquisitive, what's your reason for heading towards the tower? We shared ours, but we don't know much about yours. The question was expected. I knew their dreams of becoming S-ranked adventurers, but my own motivations were more complex and tied to a past I wasn't willing to disclose. Well, my reasons are a bit personal. I started, maintaining a calm and collected demeanor. I'm seeking answers and strength. The tower, with all its mysteries and challenges, seems like the place where I might find my answers and gain the strength to acquire those answers. My response was honest but deliberately vague, revealing just enough to pique their interest without delving into the more sensitive chapters of my past, including my disconnection from the Arashi family. Internally, I grappled with the nature of the answers I sought. Was I questioning the circumstances of my second chance at life? Was I curious about the reason behind the skill I possessed? Or, like many adventurers, was I driven by the universal question of what truly lay at the end of the tower? Perhaps it encompassed all these questions. But amidst these contemplations, one thing was crystal clear, my pursuit of strength. No longer did I wish to be overshadowed by those with power or experience the deep despair of helplessness that had haunted me for years. It was about becoming strong enough to stand on my own. I had made a promise to my mother that I would grow strong enough to alleviate her worries about me. Lucas, practical as ever, nodded. The tower certainly has a way of testing and revealing one's inquiries. Yet, only those brave enough to face it can find those answers. As we sat around the fire, the flickering flames casting shadows on our faces, the conversation continued in this vein. As we talked, an unexpected sound caught our attention. Another carriage was approaching from the horizon. It rolled to a stop near our campsite, and a group of people emerged, their expressions a mix of relief and caution. They approached us tentatively, introducing themselves with polite courtesy. "Good evening," one of them said. We're travelers, too, and we're wondering if it would be all right to set up camp nearby. It's getting late, and it would be dangerous to continue on at this hour." Their request seemed reasonable, and there was a sense of solidarity between fellow travelers on the road. We exchanged quick glances amongst ourselves, gauging each other's reactions. It was Isaac who spoke up first, his voice friendly. "Sure, you're welcome to camp here. There's safety in numbers, after all," he said, extending a hand in a gesture of goodwill. The new group, consisting of 6 men, expressed their gratitude and began setting up there a few distance away from ours. Their meal was simple and unremarkable, stale bread and dried meat, the kind of fare typical for travelers prioritizing convenience over taste. In contrast, Lila had just finished preparing a pot of vegetable soup, the aroma of which wafted enticingly through the camp. The savory scent seemed to capture the attention of the newcomers, as I noticed their eyes following the steam rising from the pot, their mouths slightly agape, clearly enticed by the smell of the soup. Yet, they made no move to ask for any, politely sticking to their modest provisions. It was at this moment that I noticed Lucas nudging Isaac with his elbow, a silent communication passing between them. Isaac, picking up on the cue, turned to the new group with a warm, friendly smile. "You're welcome to join us for dinner," he offered generously. "Lila often cooks more than we can eat." The invitation was accepted immediately, the men's faces lighting up with gratitude. As they joined us around our fire, Mia and Lila took on the role of gracious hosts. I observed them engaging with the men, their behavior reminiscent of the flirtatious manner they had directed at me earlier. This time, however, they seemed to be laying it on thicker, emphasizing the food and feeding the men in a way that was clearly meant to charm. I watched the scene with a hint of skepticism, wondering about the intent behind their actions. However, any suspicions I harbored were somewhat allayed when I saw Lucas and Isaac also partaking in the meal. Deciding to set aside my doubts, I served myself a bowl of the soup. The flavors were rich and satisfying. As the evening progressed and the meal concluded, we all retreated to our respective spots for the night. The quiet of the wilderness enveloped the camp, and slowly, I drifted off to sleep. The world around me faded, giving way to the vivid landscape of my dream. I found myself standing in the midst of a vast, snow-covered mountain range. The scene was strikingly realistic, every sensation amplified as if I were truly there. The cold was biting, seeping through my clothes and chilling me to the bone. The wind howled fiercely, a relentless force that whipped the snow into my direction. The cold air was so sharp it stung my lungs with each breath. The sense of isolation was overwhelming. There were no signs of life, no sounds but the wind's mournful cry. As I trudged through the deep snow, my footsteps were the only marks on the white canvas. The dream felt endless, an eternal march through a frozen wilderness, each step a struggle against the cold. I felt my body slowly succumbing to the freezing cold in my dream. Each step became more laborious, my muscles, flesh, and bones seemed to creak in protest under the intense chill, a sensation that felt too real to be just a dream. Just as I was on the verge of becoming completely immobilized by the frost, an enigmatic silhouette appeared in the distance. The figure was difficult to discern through the blinding snowstorm, its identity obscured by the swirling white veil of the blizzard storm. As the crystalline frost inched its way toward my heart, the figure halted. Suddenly, a burst of flames erupted and engulfing the figure, cutting through the frozen wasteland. The heat was intense, rapidly melting the surrounding snow and enveloping me in a searing warmth. The flames, while liberating, were overwhelmingly hot, scorching my skin with unbearable pain. This agonizing sensation jolted me awake from the nightmare. Ha ha ha. I woke up gasping for air, each breath producing visible plumes of heavy smoke, as if my lungs were filled with icy fog. To my astonishment and confusion, my body felt unusually cold, almost frozen. My muscles were rigid, making even the slightest movement a struggle. I couldn't comprehend why I was experiencing such extreme cold. It was a summer night, after all, and the weather had been mild. What's happening to me? I thought, bewildered and alarmed. Help! Someone, please. Agar. Through the haze of my confusion and the intense cold gripping my body, a sudden, piercing scream tore through the night, shattering the silence of the camp. It came from the direction of the other group's campsite, the men who had joined us earlier in the late evening. Straining against the stiffness in my muscles, I managed to lift my head to see what was happening. The sight that met my eyes was nothing short of horrifying. The men from the other group were being attacked, each one caught in the grasp of a violent struggle. Their screams of agony ripped through the air as their assailants, for shadowy figures, moved with lethal intent. Blood spattered across the campsite, illuminated by the flickering light of the campfires. "Why are you doing this?" The men's plea was cut short as one of the attackers, with a swift and ruthless motion, sliced through his neck. The brutality of the scene was merciless. Each member of the group was systematically and efficiently being taken down. Lying there, helpless and immobile, I could only watch in horror as the scene unfolded. As the last of the men from the other group met their grim fate, the four shadowy figures turned in unison, their attention now fixed on me. My heart pounded against my chest, a mix of fear and the lingering cold making it difficult to breathe. With slow, deliberate steps, they began to advance towards me, their figures gradually becoming more distinct as they crossed the flickering light of the campfire. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. "Ha! I should have listened to my gut," I muttered under my breath, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The figures approaching me were none other than the group I had been traveling with, Isaac, Mia, Lila, and Lucas. Each step they took seemed to echo in the silence of the night, a reminder of my misjudgment and misplaced trust. As they closed in on me, their demeanor shifted from menacing to a twisted form of playfulness. "Look who finally got up," Isaac taunted, a smirk playing on his lips. "Not too cold, are we?" His words were laced with mockery, and the others chuckled in agreement. Mia, with a dagger in her hand, sauntered over to where I lay immobilized. Instead of using the weapon, she unexpectedly draped herself over me, her body pressing against mine in a deliberately provocative manner. She leaned in close, her breath warm against my neck, and I could feel the tip of her tongue tracing my skin in a perverse gesture. "It's such a shame to get rid of you," she whispered, her voice sultry and mocking. "Your body, it's quite erotic. Imagine all the fun I could have had with you, if only you'd let yourself be seduced." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, not from the cold but from the realization of how dangerously manipulative she was. Struggling to find my voice amidst the cold shackling my body, I managed to utter a single word, heavy with confusion and a need for understanding. "Why?" The word escaped my lips in a slow, cold whisper. Mia, still draped over me, paused and looked up, amusement flickering in her eyes. "Why?" she echoed, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. Then, her demeanor shifted as she let out a laugh, sharp and devoid of warmth. "Of course, it's for money. What else?" Before I could process further, Isaac strode over, his movements deliberate and confident. With a swift motion, he grabbed Mia's hand, pulling her away from me and into his embrace. Isaac's gaze was cold and contemptuous. "Pathetic," he sneered. "You're so naive, seeking help from strangers. Did you really think we were just friendly travelers?" His words were laced with mockery, each one a stinging indictment of my trust in them. "But hey, you've been a real blessing to us," Isaac continued, his tone playful yet sinister. "Thanks to you and those other travelers, we've got funds for our journey. Looks like the gods are on our side, huh?" Isaac's face twisted into a mocking smirk as he looked down at me. "You look confused," he said. "Let me do you a favor, since you were kind enough to let us take advantage of you. I'll tell you why you're in this state. We were even considerate enough to give you a heads up, and yet, you were too naive to see it. How stupid can you be?" He paused for a moment, reveling in my shocked expression. "Thanks to Mia's ability, we concocted a potion with a hypothermia effect. We saved it for situations just like this one. We added it to the food that Lila prepared, and with her nutritional boost, the effect was intensified. That's why you're freezing right now." His explanation hit me like a ton of bricks, each word sinking in with the weight of deceit. "How?" I managed to ask, my voice barely more than a whisper, a cold breeze accompanying each breath. Isaac laughed, a sound that was both cruel and triumphant. How, you ask? Oh, you mean how we aren't affected by it? That's simple. Lila brought us our servings before she added the potion to the pot. What we ate was free of hypothermia, you idiot. Lying there, incapacitated and humiliated, a sense of my own idiocy weighed heavily upon me. Isaac leaned in close, the cold blade of his dagger glinting ominously in the dim light of the campfire. He traced the edge of the dagger around my face, his actions deliberate and menacing. How about I give you a chance to fight for your life, he taunted, his voice laced with a twisted sense of amusement. Who knows, maybe the gods will favor you. With a cruel smirk, Isaac grabbed both of my hands, placing them around the handle of the dagger, his own hands firmly over mine. I'm going to push this dagger down towards your throat, he explained, his tone mockingly instructional. All you have to do is push back, struggle as hard as you can to keep the edge from penetrating your neck. Simple, right? Well, good luck. His words sent a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. Despite the cold that had numbed my body, the imminent threat of death ignited my instinct to survive. I braced myself, ready to push back with every ounce of strength I could muster. My survival depended on it. Isaac's eyes met mine, a glint of anticipation in them, as he slowly began to apply pressure to the dagger, edging it closer to my vulnerable neck. The dagger inched closer, the sharp edge pressing slowly against my skin. A trickle of blood began to form, marking the start of what could be a fatal wound. The cold, the fear, and the feeling of betrayal mingled in a chaotic swirl within me. But amidst this turmoil, a flash from my dream surged to the forefront of my mind, the figure engulfed in flames, a burst of fire emanating from within. In that instant, as I lay at Isaac's mercy, a sly smile curled the corners of my lips. My expression caught Isaac off guard, his eyes widened in confusion and a flicker of concern passed across his face. He couldn't fathom why I would smile at such a dire moment. But he soon understood. Suddenly, flames erupted between us, originating from nowhere. The intense heat was immediate and searing, particularly at the point where Isaac's hands clutched mine on the dagger's handle. It was as if he was holding onto a red-hot piece of iron. Fuck! Isaac yelped in pain and shock, hastily retracting his hands. He staggered back, shaking his hands frantically in an attempt to dispel the agonizing heat. The others, alerted by the commotion, turned in alarm, their eyes wide as they witnessed the sudden burst of flames erupting from within me, engulfing my body in a fiery aura. I feel much better. Chapter 17: The Advantage of Self-Immolation, Part 1. A note from FirstBite. Enjoy. In the wake of the unexpected eruption of flames, the campsite was plunged into a brighter gleam. The members of the group who had betrayed me were now thrown off balance, their eyes fixed on me with a shock. Isaac, nursing his scorched hands, backed away, his face contorted with pain. Mia, Lila, and Lucas exchanged serious glances, unsure of how to react to this sudden shift. The cold that had immobilized me was now replaced by warmth, coursing through my veins. Dancing around me, crackling and hissing. The light emitted by the flames was intense. It cut through the darkness of the night, casting the forest around us into vibrant glow. The trees and the foliage were illuminated by the light, creating long, flickering shadows across the ground. What was truly surprising, however, was the realization that the flames surrounding me weren't as painful as they used to be. This development sent a wave of confusion through my mind until a system prompt appeared, offering a much-needed explanation. Due to the clash between extreme cold and extreme heat, the negative effects of self-immolation have been temporarily mitigated. Current consumption, 1% of maximum life per second, reduced from the usual 2%. Now aware of the altered state of my self-immolation ability, I noticed a significant change in my physical sensations. Instead of the intense, scorching pain that usually accompanied the activation of my flames, the experience was blatantly different. The discomfort that I did feel was mild at best. It was reminiscent of the feeling one might have while taking a warm bath. The heat, rather than peeling at my skin with unbearable intensity, now felt soothing and almost nurturing. It was a comforting, deep-seated heat one might feel after a vigorous session of physical exercise. My muscles, previously tensed and frozen, now relaxed, basking in the warmth that flowed through them. And due to the decreased life consumption rate, now at only 1% per second, my passive skill Enduring Vitality came into play more effectively. For the first time, the cursed skill that had been more of a burden than a boon seemed genuinely usable. The flames that once drained my life force with their unrelenting heat now burned in a state of equilibrium, balanced by the regenerative power of Enduring Vitality. It was a remarkable turn of events. The skill I had once dreaded invoking was now aiding me in an unexpected way. Despite the newfound usability of my self-immolation skill, I was painfully aware of its uselessness. Essentially, I was still just a human torch, flames engulfing me without extending beyond my immediate vicinity. I couldn't project these flames like a fireball from my palms, nor could I set a wider area ablaze. The fire was confined to my body, serving more as a personal shield than an offensive weapon. The most I could do with this ability in its current form was to cause searing pain to anyone who made direct contact with me, akin to touching a scalding hot surface. However, I couldn't afford to dwell on the limitations of my ability at this moment. The fact remained that self-immolation, in its current state, was providing me with a critical advantage, a means to fend off the cold. Flames! Isaac exclaimed, struggling to comprehend the sudden transformation. Mia, equally taken aback, turned to me, her eyes wide with shock and curiosity. It can't be. Are you a pyromancer? She questioned. I stood there, silent, unable to confirm or deny their suspicions. Lucas, sensing the escalating tension and confusion among the group, quickly stepped in with a voice of reason. Everyone, calm down, he said, maintaining a level of composure amidst the chaos. Remember, numerous classes have the capability to manipulate flames. It's not exclusive to pyromancers. Besides, what are the odds that a member of the Arashi clan would be out here, in such a remote location? It's probably just a coincidence, he explained, his tone steady and persuasive. He aimed to diffuse the situation, guiding the group away from hasty and potentially erroneous assumptions. Lila, her expression fraught with worry, joined the conversation, adding to the growing sense of unease. But what if he is from the Arashi clan, she said, her voice laced with concern. If he ends up dead, and they investigate, they might trace it back to us. I can't even begin to think of the consequences. Her words hung in the air, amplifying the gravity of the situation. The fear of retribution from a powerful and influential family like the Arashi was not something to be taken lightly. The mere possibilities sent a ripple of anxiety through the group. Lucas, however, seemed to take a more pragmatic, yet darker, approach. If he really is an Arashi, then we have even more reason to get rid of him, he argued, his tone resolute. Think about it, if we let him live and he turns out to be one of them, he could always come back for revenge, family in tow. We can't risk that. The atmosphere among the group shifted palpably as they reached a silent consensus. The expressions on their faces transformed from uncertainty to grim very quickly, each one now exuding an unmistakable intent to kill. I watched as the group of four began to approach me. In this moment of imminent danger, my mind raced to assess the situation. Lila and Mia, with their respective abilities of enhancing consumables and creating unpredictable potions, were certainly known, but they weren't an immediate threat other than the daggers they held in hand. My primary concern was Isaac and Lucas, whose classes and skills remained unknown to me. Their unpredictability made them the most immediate and dangerous variables in this confrontation. The odds were not in my favor. Facing four adversaries at once was a daunting challenge. The fight erupted into a frenzied melee, with all four members of the group launching a relentless assault on me. I found myself in a desperate struggle, surrounded by adversaries on all sides. Isaac, his eyes cold and calculating, was the first to launch an attack. He lunged at me with his dagger, each strike dangerously precise. I narrowly dodged his blade, feeling the rush of adrenaline fueling my movements. Mia and Lila weren't far behind, each adopting their own style. Mia's movements were quick and agile, her dagger a silver flash in the dim light. Lila, more cautious, waited for openings to exploit, her attacks more measured but just as deadly. Lucas joined in, coordinating his strikes with Isaac's, creating a deadly dance that was hard to predict. "You're outnumbered and outmatched," he shouted, swinging his weapon with force. Despite my best efforts, their blades found their mark, leaving shallow cuts that accumulated over time. Despite the relentless pace of the battle, the constant movement, and the accumulating cuts, a surprising realization dawned on me: I did not feel the expected fatigue. Normally, such a prolonged and intense skirmish would leave anyone panting and drained, in particular from the amount of blood one would lose from the cuts, but my body felt like it was being fueled by a constant source of energy. Confused by this unexpected resilience, I glanced at a recent cut on my arm. While the wound was still there, the bleeding had stopped almost instantly, and the gash was rapidly closing itself. This wasn't the work of my enduring vitality skill, which primarily focused on healing the life consumed by my self-immolation. Instead, something else was at play. Then it hit me: the cauterization. A well-known medical technique I had seen employed several times within the Arashi family during combat practice. The Arashi seniors would often spar with such intensity and ferocity, resulting in severe injuries. Unable to always rely on potions or healers due to exorbitant costs, they had their own method of quick, yet limited, healing: cauterization. Cauterization involves using heat to burn tissue, which can seal wounds or stop bleeding. In the case of the Arashi, a family of pyromancers, they could easily produce flames to mend their injuries. The intense heat from their pyromancy would cauterize the wounds sustained in combat, stemming blood loss and sealing cuts rapidly. Now, amidst this fight for survival, I was inadvertently benefiting from the same process. The intense heat from my self-immolation was acting to cauterize my wounds as they occurred. Each slash or cut was quickly sealed by the heat, preventing significant blood loss and allowing me to continue fighting without the usual hindrance of such injuries. A smile crept across my face, almost involuntarily. Excitement bubbled within me as I began to understand the true potential of my power. Until now, the skill information hadn't explicitly listed these advantages, but in the heat of battle, I had discovered not one but two distinct uses for my self-immolation ability. But at this very moment, I noticed two other crucial advantages. Ha, 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 ha. What's this? My ability isn't as bad as I had thought. I couldn't stop laughing even at this moment of potential death. Damn it, what's happening to my weapon? Isaac exclaimed in frustration, inspecting his deformed dagger. Mia, swinging her now blunted dagger, echoed his sentiment. This heat, it's ruining our blades. Each time their daggers struck at me, the constant exposure to the intense heat emanating from my body was taking its toll on their weapons. The metal of their blades was visibly deteriorating, slowly warping and melting under the sustained high temperature. The realization that their primary tools of offense were becoming ineffective added a layer of desperation to their attacks. They were growing visibly exhausted, their movements becoming less coordinated and more erratic as they struggled to adapt to the changing dynamics. Beyond deteriorating their weapons, the intense heat emanating from my body served another purpose. It added a layer of oppressive heat to anyone who came close to me, hastening their exhaustion. Fuck. This heat, it's unbearable, gasped Lucas, wiping sweat from his brow as he tried to maintain his attack pattern. The relentless heat was visibly taking its toll, draining their energy at an accelerated pace. Mia, attempting another strike, faltered slightly, her face flushed from the heat. It's like fighting in a furnace, she complained, her movements losing their earlier precision. Lila, while trying to stay focused, was clearly struggling with the sweltering temperature. We need to finish this, or we'll be cooked alive, she said through gritted teeth, determination battling against the overwhelming heat. As the fight wore on, the tide continued to turn in my favor. The group's exhaustion from the heat, coupled with their deteriorating weapons, was evident. However, just when it seemed like their resolve was waning, Isaac called out to Lucas with a tone of urgency. Lucas, we can't stall this any longer. Use your ability. Isaac commanded, his voice cutting through the sweltering air. Lucas, who had been on the back foot due to the oppressive heat, nodded in understanding, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, inconspicuous needle. With a swift and precise movement, he threw it towards me. Instinctively, I raised my hand to defend myself, but the needle was too fast, embedding itself into my arm. However, due to the intense heat radiating from my body, the needle quickly began to melt. "Got him," Lucas exclaimed triumphantly. The needle got into him. The paralyzing effect should start any moment now. "Isaac, finish him off." Confusion coursed through me. Lucas had mentioned paralysis, but I felt no different, no signs of the creeping immobility. Meanwhile, Isaac, trusting in Lucas's ability, advanced with his dagger, which began emitting a sharp, bright light, signaling an enhanced attack. Anticipating a strike, he swung the dagger towards my neck, but I managed to dodge swiftly, much to their astonishment. Isaac, infuriated by the miss, turned to Lucas in a rage. "What happened?" he screamed, his anger palpable. Lucas looked just as puzzled, his brows furrowed in confusion. "I don't understand. I used my paralyzing ability. He shouldn't be able to move." It was then that the pieces fell into place for me. Lucas's ability likely involved paralyzing his target, and the needle he threw must have been imbued with a substance to that effect. Isaac's follow-up with an enhanced attack from his glowing dagger, which quickly lost its luminescence after missing its target, was part of their coordinated strategy. But then, yet again, realization dawned on me. Sterilization, I thought. High temperatures are known to kill bacteria, viruses, and other ailments. The paralyzing agent, once introduced into my body, must have been neutralized by the extreme heat generated by my self-immolation skill. Essentially, the heat was acting as a sterilizing agent, nullifying the effects of the paralyzing substance upon contact with my skin. A surge of electrifying excitement coursed through me, igniting a fire in my spirit that matched the flames enveloping my body. I couldn't contain the gritty, exuberant energy that erupted from within. Every hit, every damn moment in this fight. This is just insanely awesome. My eyes blazed with fierce and a voracious hunger for knowledge. The fear and uncertainty that had clouded my thoughts were now completely overshadowed by an overpowering desire to understand what else my ability provided. The flames around me responded to my heightened emotions, growing more intense and fierce. To the others, I must have appeared as a demon forged from the flames. "Let's see what more I can do with these flames," I shouted, a wild and horrific grin spreading across my face. A note from FirstBite. I hope you found this chapter enjoying. Here are the key benefits from his ability. Cauterization, immediate sealing of wounds through cauterization, effectively halting bleeding and aiding in wound closure. Reduced sensitivity to cold, the power significantly diminishes the effects of cold exposure, offering protection in frigid environments. Sterilization, the high temperatures generated can effectively eliminate bacteria, viruses, and other ailments, ensuring a sterile environment. Thermal melting, this involves heating metals to their melting points, transforming their solid state into liquid, which can be pivotal in various scenarios such as the one in this chapter. Heat exhaustion, the ability to generate high temperatures, inflicts heat exhaustion to those that are exposed to it for a prolonged amount of time, especially important during intense physical activity in hot conditions. Please stay tuned for the next chapter, where I'll unveil additional advantages of this ability. The journey of discovery is just beginning. Chapter 18: The Advantage of Self-Immolation, Part 2. A note from FirstBite. Caution, the following chapter includes scenes of graphic violence. Enjoy. An overwhelming sensation coursed through me, teetering on the brink of something dark and exhilarating. It was a feeling I had never known before, one that edged dangerously close to a delight in chaos and power. For the first time, I found myself in the midst of a genuine battle, a stark confrontation between life and death. I had always envisioned my first real test of strength to be within the tower, against its monstrous inhabitants, not against my own kind. But I was acutely aware that humans, with their complex motives and cunning, could pose threats far greater than any creature. The rush of the fight was intoxicating in a way I had never anticipated. Far from any hesitation or struggle, I found myself deeply immersed in the combat, more alive in this moment of conflict than I had ever felt before. Observing the fear and worry that now marked their faces provided with a dark thrill. It was deeply satisfying to see the realization dawn on them. They had severely underestimated me, and now they were the ones ensnared in a desperate plight. The power dynamics had shifted dramatically, and I reveled in it far too much. Their expressions, once marked by confidence and killing intent, were now etched with desperation and fear. In their attempt to overpower me, they had unwittingly unleashed something within me. In that moment, my vision was tinged with a controlled red, not born of blind anger or unbridled rage, but a focused, almost a desired bloodlust. I found myself consumed by a crave to overpower them, to extinguish their lives as they had tried to extinguish mine, and to discover what further secrets my abilities held. Yet, there was no remorse in me for these dark thoughts. They had sought to end my life, and it seemed only natural, only fair, to return the sentiment in kind. As the realization that they were now at a disadvantage sank in, the group fell eerily silent. The only sounds were the crackling of my flames and the rapid beating of my heart, thundering in my chest like a relentless drum. My muscles were in a state that was hard to describe, relaxed yet tensed, as if I had undergone a long session of intense workout, while simultaneously basking in the warmth and relaxation of a sauna. It was an unusual feeling, yet one that I found surprisingly enjoyable. The group finally spoke up, their voices laced with resignation. "We were wrong," one of them said, their tone suggesting a truce. "Let's just end things here. No need to take this any further." Their words fell on deaf ears. I looked at them with a stoic expression, my resolve unwavering. Despite their attempt to de-escalate, my desire to exact retribution was stronger than ever. "It's too late for that." In a swift, impulsive decision, I charged at them. As I took a forceful step forward, another unexpected phenomenon occurred. The strength I exerted propelled me forward with such velocity that I struggled to maintain balance. Realizing that I wouldn't be able to land a precise punch at this speed, I made a split-second decision and aimed directly at Lucas. With my elbow leading, I collided with him with a thunderous impact. Bam! The force of the collision sent Lucas flying backward, crashing into a nearby tree with a loud bang that reverberated through the area. The sheer power of the impact surprised even me. The impact had been so forceful that it had carved the tree nearly in half, the wood splintered and fractured from the sheer force. Lucas himself was embedded into the crevice created by his body's impact. His upper body clothing was scorched to ash and his exposed skin bore a significant burn mark. The burn resembled the mark left by a branding iron on a horse, a distinct and painful emblem imprinted on his flesh. He lay motionless in the hollow tree, his breath shallow and labored. The severity of the impact, combined with the burn from my flames, had rendered him incapacitated in an instant. I found myself as bewildered as the others who stared in shock at their friend's incapacitated form. The surge in power and speed I had just exhibited was staggering and unexpected. Such feats are typically associated with significant investment in dexterity and strength stats, not vitality, which is where all my points were allocated. How then could I display such remarkable physical capabilities? My mind raced to find an explanation, and at that moment, a plausible theory began to form. If we consider that physical exertion generates heat as a byproduct of the effort exerted by muscles, it stands to reason that the heat would enhance muscle flexibility and strength. This, combined with another factor, adrenaline, could potentially explain this unexpected boost. Adrenaline, often released in response to the fight-or-flight instinct, isn't just triggered by external threats or stressors. Internal factors, such as the stress of being self-immolated, could also prompt its release. The extreme situation I was in, compounded by the continual self-inflicted damage from my skill, likely prompted my brain to signal the adrenal glands to release adrenaline, thus enhancing my power and reaction speed. Two factors of symbiotic relationship were being at play for this display to occur: the intense heat permeating my muscle, which contributed in the augmentation of my musculoskeletal strength, and the combination of adrenaline. A rush of exhilaration surged through me, an almost euphoric feeling that was both bewildering and invigorating. "Ah, this sensation, it's exhilarating," I found myself murmuring, unable to contain the rush of adrenaline and endorphins coursing through me. The flames, once a source of sheer pain, were now intertwined with a bizarre yet undeniable sense of pleasure. My body, continually burning, felt increasingly alive, not just in a physical sense, but in a cascade of euphoric sensation. I gazed upwards into the sky, my face flushed red, fully embracing the dual sensations of pain and pleasure. It was perhaps a cocktail of endorphins released by my body in response to the self-inflicted damage, and the thrill of unlocking new facets of my ability. Overwhelmed by the intense rush of euphoria, my voice rang out clear and fervent against the backdrop of the night. I want more. The desire for that exhilarating sensation was overpowering. It was as if a floodgate had opened within me, unleashing a craving for the rush, the heat, the sheer exhilaration of battle. With every passing second, this yearning intensified, propelling me further into the fray. Emboldened by this hunger, I turned my attention back to the three others. They stood hesitantly, their expressions a mix of fear and uncertainty, having witnessed the transformation in me. Like a tempest, I threw myself into them. Each movement was fueled by my desire for more of the adrenaline-fueled euphoria that the battle brought. My attacks were relentless, driven by a combination of my enhanced physical capabilities and the insatiable hunger for the exhilarating sensation that combat now provided. The flames that wreathed my body seemed to feed off my emotions, growing more intense with every strike and counterstrike. My opponents struggled to keep up, their efforts hampered by their failing weapons and the oppressive heat that radiated from me. The once cohesive group found themselves overwhelmed by the ferocity of my assault. One after another, they succumbed to the relentless onslaught of my flames and fists. Their once confident faces now twisted in fear and desperation. "Please, stop. We surrender," Isaac pleaded, his voice shaking as he held up his hands in a futile attempt to ward off my attacks. Mia, a stark contrast to her previously confident and seductive demeanor, was now consumed by fear and desperation. Tears streamed down her face as she made a final, pleading appeal. "You've won. Please, no more. I beg you," she sobbed, her voice cracking under the weight of her terror. I know we tried to kill you, but I'll do anything you want. You can use my body. I can be useful, so please don't kill me." Her words were a mix of bargaining and sheer panic. Her plea was heart-wrenching, a cry of absolute despair from someone who realized the gravity of their situation too late. Mia's humanizing display of vulnerability might have given pause to another, but in me, it only ignited a darker desire. Gazing upon her tear-streaked face, her body trembling with fear at the prospect of her imminent demise, I felt a surge of a different kind of excitement. A horrifying smile, one that spoke of an unquenchable thirst and a swelling lust, spread across my face. In the eerie silence that followed her plea, I moved towards her. My approach was deliberate, each step fueled by the intensity of the moment. As I reached her, my scorching hands, radiating intense heat, clasped around her neck, pressing her down to the ground. I reveled in the terror that flickered in her eyes, the pain etched on her face as she struggled beneath my grip. Gradually, I tightened my hold, suffocating any attempts she made to draw breath. Her skin began to emit smoke under the searing touch of my hands, the heat causing her eyes to redden and blisters to form on her face. These blisters, filled with trapped oxygen and heated to the breaking point, burst open, releasing small spurts of blood. The sight of her desperate fight for life, the transformation of her once confident facade into a tableau of agony and fear, was intoxicating. I was lost in that moment. At this point, it was clear that the situation had transcended far beyond a mere struggle for survival. The initial need to defend myself had evolved, or perhaps devolved, into something far more unrestrained. Witnessing the brutal treatment of her friend, Lila's face contorted with horror and fear. She couldn't stand the sight any longer. In a sudden, desperate move, she turned and fled, her screams for help piercing the night as she attempted to escape. I grabbed Mia's lifeless body and hurled her with full force towards Lila. The action was instinctual, almost reflexive. Mia's body became an unwilling projectile, flying through the air and colliding with Lila. The impact of Mia's body against Lila's was heavy and forceful, bringing Lila's desperate escape to an abrupt halt. Both of them tumbled to the ground in a tangled heap, the force of the collision evident in the way their bodies crumpled upon impact. As I approached where Lila lay, I was prepared to inflict further pain, expecting to see her struggle as Mia had. However, upon closer inspection, I found that the brutal impact had already sealed her fate. Lila's neck was contorted in a way that left no doubt of her demise. The collision had been fatal. TCH. A sharp click of my tongue escaped in frustration. Despite myself, there was a hint of disappointment in my reaction. Isaac, the last of the group, was on his knees, his forehead pressed to the ground in a posture of complete submission. His body shook with fear, and his voice, once commanding and confident, was now reduced to a desperate, quivering plea. "Please, please, spare me," he begged, his words muffled against the earth. "I'll do anything you ask, just let me live." His plea was filled with the raw fear of someone who had seen his companions fall and knew he was the last one left. I made a mistake. I know that now. I'll leave, disappear, you'll never see me again. Please, I'm begging you, he continued, the tremor in his voice betraying his terror. Standing over Isaac, weighing his fate in the balance of my judgment. "It wouldn't be fair, would it?" I said, my gaze fixed on him. "To let you go while your companions have already faced their judgment. I consider myself a fair judge, after all." I walked over to where the other travelers, victims of the group's earlier violence, lay. Next to one of the lifeless bodies, a sword caught my eye. Picking it up, I felt its weight and balance, a tool of death now on my hands. Turning back to Isaac, who remained prostrate on the ground, I approached with deliberate steps. As I examined the sword, I ran my fingers along its edge, feeling the cool steel. But it didn't stay cool for long. The heat emanating from my body began to interact with the metal, transforming it. The blade's color shifted from its original silver to a glowing, molten red. The edges of the sword started to shimmer with the intense heat it absorbed, becoming a weapon not just of sharpness, but of searing heat. With the sword now radiating an intense heat, I brought its edge slowly towards Isaac's neck. The proximity of the red-hot blade caused him to react instinctively. He began to crawl away in a desperate struggle, trying to put any distance he could between himself and the searing edge now threatening his life. With a deep sense of finality, I raised the sword, now glowing with intense heat. The air around us seemed to still in anticipation, a moment suspended in time. Then, in one swift, decisive motion, I brought the sword down. The heated blade made contact with Isaac's neck, cutting through with a lethal finality. Isaac's head was severed in a single, clean stroke, his body going limp as the life was swiftly extinguished from it. My mind, still riding the high of adrenaline and euphoria, gradually began to recognize the reality of what I had done. Then, as if on cue, the effect of the hyperthermia potion wore off, bringing an abrupt end to the mitigated negative effects of my self-immolation. Effect of hyperthermia has passed. The negative effects of self-immolation have been restored. Current consumption, 2% of maximum life per second, increased from the mitigated 1%. Even after the intensity of the battle had subsided, I remained motionless, my self-immolation ability still active, consuming my health points at a steady pace. Perhaps there was a part of me that clung to the rush, the overwhelming sensations I had experienced, unwilling to let them dissipate so quickly. I stood there, waiting for the automatic deactivation of my ability, which was programmed to kick in when my health points dwindled to 1 health point. As the seconds ticked by, my health continued to decrease, slowly but steadily. I could almost feel each point as it ebbed away. Then, amidst this quiet moment of reflection, a system notification materialized before me, unexpected and startling in its sudden appearance. You have gone past your body's limit. You have gained 1 vitality stat. Chapter 19, Introspection. Surrounded by the quiet aftermath, I found myself the sole survivor amid the consequences of the night's violence. The bodies of my adversaries, those who had plotted against me, lay motionless. Nearby, the victims of their earlier cruelty shared the same fate, innocent lives caught in the crossfire of their deadly intentions. In this moment of solitude, I was acutely aware of the weight of survival. Yet, my mind was not preoccupied with the adrenaline-fueled thrill of battle or the newfound depths of my abilities. Instead, what commanded my attention was the system notification that had appeared before me, signaling an unexpected increase in my vitality. It was a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, prompting me to make a conscious decision to deactivate my self-immolation ability. The risk of letting it consume my health was too great, and there were pressing matters that demanded my focus. With the flames extinguished, the immediate threat to my life subsided, offering me a chance to gather my thoughts. The night had unveiled numerous revelations, each demanding consideration and understanding. The discovery of my ability's potential, the unexpected pleasure derived from the heat of battle, and the sobering reality of my actions, all these aspects needed to be sifted through and comprehended. I knew I needed a moment of calm to reflect on everything that had transpired. The adrenaline that had fueled my survival now gave way to a pressing need for introspection. I began to piece together the insights gained from the night's events. Understanding my newfound prowess was crucial, and I acknowledged 4 key revelations that shaped my experience. Firstly, the extraordinary level of power I had displayed was primarily a result of the hyperthermia effect. This effect created a balance between the extreme heat of my self-immolation skill and the intense cold of the potion. It mitigated the detrimental aspects of my ability. The constant drain on my health and the excruciating pain of being burned alive was largely mitigated. Without such a counterbalance, replicating this level of power would be unsustainable, if not impossible right now. Secondly, the euphoric sensation I experienced was deeply unnatural. In my first life, I had spent countless hours in the training room, not only practicing mana manipulation but also poring over books about human anatomy to understand my own body better. This knowledge helped me realize that the euphoria was likely a result of endorphins released in response to pain. However, there was another layer to this sensation, a sense of gratification in overturning the expectations of those who had underestimated me. It wasn't the act of killing that brought me pleasure, rather, it was the realization of my strength and the reversal of roles. The satisfaction of proving my detractors wrong, of showing them the power they had overlooked in me, intermingled with the endorphins to create a potent mix of feelings that was both exhilarating and disconcerting. Thirdly, and perhaps most intriguingly, was the multifaceted nature of my ability, which revealed itself to be much more than a simple mage's fire spell. One of the primary advantages was its ability to counteract extreme cold, acting as a sort of personal furnace that shielded me from chilling effects. More than that, the intense heat it generated appeared to enhance muscle flexibility and strength. This enhancement stemmed from the musculoskeletal system responding to the heat, a phenomenon I hadn't anticipated but proved crucial in combat. Additionally, the skill offered medical benefits, such as cauterization and sterilization. These were particularly useful in the battle where injuries were common. Cauterization could seal wounds and stop bleeding, while sterilization could neutralize potentially harmful agents, as seen with the paralyzing needle. But perhaps the most striking revelation was the realization that this ability, though classified under a mage class, seemed ideally suited for close combat. It was a body enhancement skill in disguise. The ability to generate high temperatures not only inflicted heat exhaustion on opponents but also disrupted their physical capabilities, especially under intense conditions. This strategic aspect of the ability opened up new avenues for its use in combat, far removed from traditional mage-like spells. This was a groundbreaking discovery for me. It was the first time I encountered a mage class endowed with a skill that diverged so significantly from conventional spellcasting. The realization of the fourth and most groundbreaking aspect of my ability struck me with the force of a revelation. Self-immolation, by its very nature, was a self-harming skill, continuously inflicting damage upon my body for as long as it remained active. And here lay the crucial insight: vitality, a stat typically enhanced through enduring damage, was being directly influenced by this self-inflicted harm. The realization dawned on me with a mix of astonishment and self-reproach. I'm such a dumbass, I can't believe I overlooked this synergy. I thought to myself. The constant damage inflicted by my self-immolation skill wasn't just a painful side effect, it was actively contributing to the development of my vitality stat. Each moment I sustained the skill, I was effectively training my vitality, pushing it closer to the threshold where it would increase. This was a revelation with profound implications. It suggested that by enduring the self-inflicted damage of my ability, I could continuously improve my vitality stat. This method of stat enhancement was unheard of, a groundbreaking discovery that defied conventional stat development. And I was the only one that could do it. The potential of this discovery was immense. If I could find a way to sustain the self-harm inflicted by my ability, I could potentially unlock continuous growth in my vitality. It was a strategy that could redefine the limits of my endurance and resilience. My mind was racing with the implications of my newfound understanding. A sudden thought struck me. If such a profound synergy existed between my self-immolation ability and my vitality stat, it begged the question, what other connections and potential synergies might exist among my skills and attributes? With a sense of growing anticipation, I called up my skill window, eager to explore this line of thought further. My eyes scanned the information displayed, focusing on the proficiency levels of both my self-immolation and enduring vitality skills. As I took in the details, a revelation crystallized in my mind, affirming the path I had chosen. The significant increase in the proficiency levels of both my self-immolation and enduring vitality skills was not just a coincidence, they had risen in tandem, each reflecting the same amount of proficiency gained. This fascinating development revealed a profound connection between the two skills. The active use of self-immolation was intrinsically linked to the triggering of enduring vitality, causing both skills to develop simultaneously and at the same frequency. This revelation was yet again another eye-opener. It suggested another symbiotic relationship between two abilities, where the challenges posed by one skill actively promoted the growth of the other, turning each moment of pain and endurance into an opportunity for both skills to develop together. Seeing the tangible results of my struggles in the form of increased skill proficiency was a powerful motivator. It was a confirmation that my experiences, no matter how harrowing, were contributing to my development. It was a powerful motivator, affirming that each trial was a building block towards growth. As the early morning light filtered through the trees, casting shadows on the ground, I turned my attention away from the revelations about my skills and faced the grim reality before me. The corpses lay strewn about, a reminder of the night's violence. The ground was marred with blood. What should I do with them? I found myself murmuring aloud. The question was more than just practical, it was a moral and ethical consideration. Dealing with the aftermath of a battle was a responsibility I couldn't ignore. Chapter 20: The Quiet After. A note from FirstBite. Enjoy. After a moment of deep thought about the aftermath of the night's confrontation, I made the difficult decision to gather the bodies together. It was a pragmatic choice, born out of necessity rather than cold-heartedness. Perhaps this act of gathering what was left behind was my attempt to temper the unsettling thrill and enjoyment I had experienced in the heat of battle. It could have been a subconscious effort to reaffirm my sense of humanity, to remind myself that there was still a moral compass guiding my actions, despite the darkness I had navigated. Yet, this thought process left me questioning, was this truly a path to reconciling with my actions, or was I merely seeking justification for the exhilaration I felt? Was this an honest attempt at self-reflection, or a convenient way to alleviate the guilt and discomfort that came with the pleasure derived from overpowering those who wished me harm? I couldn't help but wonder if there was a right answer, or if the journey I was on would continually challenge me to evaluate and reevaluate my actions and their motivations. What's done is done, let's just do what we can now. Before I did, I took a moment to search the dead bodies, extracting any valuables they carried. It wasn't an act I took lightly, but survival in this merciless world dictated harsh necessities. My mother had given me some money, true, but it was a finite resource, hardly enough for the long and uncertain journey ahead. With a sense of somber practicality, I removed armors, weapons, and other items of value from those who no longer had use for them. Each piece I set aside felt like a silent testament to the brutal realities of survival. I carefully placed these items in the cart that had brought me and the ones who had betrayed me to this place, now repurposed for my solitary journey. To begin with, there wasn't much to loot. Much like myself, both the individuals I had traveled with and those unfortunate souls who had crossed paths with us seemed to lack any significant resources. A handful of bronze coins was all that could be found, along with the armor and weapon they wore, which, when sold in bulk, might fetch a few silver coins. It was a modest haul. After carefully removing their belongings and gathering them in one spot, I found myself pausing, my gaze lingering on the lifeless forms of those who, for a brief moment, I had thought might become my first companions in this unforgiving world. Despite the rush of proving them wrong, of their expectations of myself in the most definitive way, a sense of disappointment and sadness crept over me. There was a poignant sense of what might have been, the hopeful ifs that now would never come to pass. These individuals, misguided as they were, had momentarily offered a glimpse of camaraderie, of shared purpose, however fleeting and illusory that might have been. I wandered around the area, collecting leaves and branches, and carefully arranged them over the bodies. It was a makeshift preparation, a way to ensure that their final departure was handled with some semblance of dignity, despite the circumstances. With the foliage and wood piled atop them, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come next. Activating my self-immolation skill, I watched as flames enveloped my hand. Then, with a resigned sense of purpose, I placed my burning hand onto the pile of debris. Instantly, a small wisp of smoke curled upwards, quickly expanding into a fierce blaze. The fire caught eagerly, consuming the dry leaves and branches with a voracious appetite before licking at the edges of the bodies beneath. In moments, what had been a solemn gathering of the deceased transformed into a large bonfire, the flames reaching skyward as if in a desperate grasp for the heavens. I stood back, watching the scene unfold. The fire crackled loudly, breaking the silence of the early morning with its insatiable roar. The sight of the flames consuming the bodies, reducing them to ash and smoke, the finality of death. As the fire burned, the air filled with the acrid scent of smoke. I watched until the flames began to wane, their fierce energy spent, leaving behind a glowing bed of embers and the charred remains of what once was. With a deep, steadying breath, I made my way towards the chariot, the vehicle that had brought me this far. Climbing aboard, I settled into the passenger seat, the map spread out on my lap, its routes and destinations clearly laid out by its previous owner. However, a sudden realization stopped me cold. I had no idea how to steer a horse, let alone ride one. The practicalities of travel, which I had taken for granted while in the company of others, now loomed as significant obstacles. The horses, sensing my presence, shifted restlessly, as if awaiting instruction, but I was at a loss. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. The realization was both humbling and frustrating. My gaze shifted from the map to the horses, contemplating my next move. Determined not to let this setback deter me, I resolved to learn. Let's take this slowly, shall we? I'm learning as we go, so I'm counting on you to be a bit patient with me. Let's not make this any harder than it needs to be, please. I approached the horses cautiously, offering a calming hand, my mind racing through every scrap of information I might have come across in my readings or observations. It was clear that if I was to continue on my path, I would need to adapt quickly. With a tentative grip on the reins and a hopeful plea, I embarked on what was to be one of the most unanticipated challenges of my journey, mastering the art of horse-driven travel. The first few attempts to coax the horse into motion were, to put it mildly, less than successful. Each tug on the rein seemed to send a different, often contradictory, signal, leading to an awkward dance of starts, stops, and bewildering turns. All right, let's try this again. I muttered to myself, more as a way to bolster my own confidence than any expectation of a sudden breakthrough. The horse, for its part, seemed to regard me with a mix of curiosity and mild disdain, as if questioning my qualifications for this. Our first real attempt at forward motion was more of a sideways meander, much to my chagrin and the horse's apparent amusement. Each pull of the reins, intended to guide us along the path, seemed to be interpreted as an invitation to explore the scenic route, through bushes, around trees, and, on one memorable occasion, directly towards a rather surprised flock of birds that scattered in a flutter. Okay, maybe a bit more to the left. No, not that much left, I exclaimed as we narrowly avoided a rather large tree that I'm certain hadn't been in our path a moment ago. The horse, perhaps sensing my growing frustration, decided to take a more cooperative stance, or perhaps it had simply grown tired of our aimless wandering. Gradually, through a series of trial and error that would have been comedic to any onlooker, we began to find our rhythm. I learned the subtleties of the reins, the slight pressures, and gestures that communicated my intentions more clearly. The horse, in turn, seemed to grow accustomed to my unique style of command, or perhaps it had simply resigned itself to its fate. Our detours, though numerous and often laughably misguided, had taught me more about navigation than I could have hoped to learn in a more conventional manner. As we finally settled into a steady pace, the chariot rolling smoothly behind us, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the endeavor. Well, that was one way to learn, I said, glancing down at my four-legged companion, who seemed to flick its ears in agreement, or perhaps it was simply relieved that our erratic journey had taken a turn towards normalcy. The misadventure had transitioned into a steady journey forward, marking the continuation of my journey toward a destination that had loomed large in my thoughts since the beginning, the tower.